Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today's episode is about the intentional leader, mastering presence, boundaries, and the art of the unfinished portfolio. I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast Eduardo Bonefont, who retired last year from his role as the Worldwide Vice President of Technical Services at BD. Eduardo was on the podcast back in episode 139, which was titled Slowing Down to Speed Up, an episode that I still reference multiple years later. So it was a great conversation and excited for today's. Eduardo, welcome back.
It's good to be here, Sarah, and thank you for the invitation. It's good to be conversing about great leadership topics.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have an incredible career to now look back on. And I know that you are, still very engaged. We saw each other at the Service Council Symposium. I know, you're still very involved in the community and have some great insights to share. So topic today is the intentional leader. So this is a phrase that we hear, in the leadership space. Can you tell us how you define an intentional leader and why intentionality is such a crucial mindset or skill for today's executives?
Well, thanks, Sarah. And again, that's right. I want to make sure I'm clear that the concept of intentional leader, and that means leading with purpose, is a well-established idea. But how I've used it, and based on my decades of operational experience, in my own personal reflection, I have developed some specific actionable operating models on how to deliver that purpose consistently. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to share my personal spin. That's what I can do and share with all of you. It's a model that I've used because reactive leaders can no longer survive in today's environment. Everything moves too fast. An intentional leader is defined by the conscious and strategic allocation of our most finite resource, and that is time and energy. This is a space where we can create a highest return where rather than just reacting to the urgent demands of the status quo. So my advice is for intentional leadership is built on three things that I've used. The number one is presence. The required need to shut out distractions, to be fully invested in the critical moments that build trust and drive your cultures. Number two, I define a strategy. It's a relentless commitment to re-engineering your performance and executing a bold vision. I've used models such as, and I'll discuss more later, think big, start small, move fast, and accept risk. And then last is legacy. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, with the unfinished portfolio, is the intentional focus of maximizing long-term impact. This is where I've connected my personal mission of the unfinished portfolio, and that is the final high impact contributions that you are uniquely qualified to make before your professional career concludes, mm-hmm. which is something I just went through. As you mentioned, that I'm retired. And this isn't just a mindset, it's a personal operating model for ensuring that our vast experience is fully leveraged to create a legacy which leaves you with no regrets.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So you mentioned presence, and if we think about being intentional, I can understand how being present is important. What practical steps did you find were effective in ensuring that you were giving your full attention in, critical moments?
Yeah, and the need for leaders to be present is not a soft skill you can develop. It is the foundation of the effective communications we have, how we set the team culture. An intentional leader must aggressively defend his focus. To ensure you're fully present in critical moments, whether it's a one-on-one, a strategy session, or in an executive meeting, you must implement this discipline to be focused and present. You got to remove the distractions. And this is the most critical step. As a leader, insist that laptops are put away, People put away their phones. Video cameras on and online. The leader must be the first to model this behavior. I mean, just a quick glance at laptops, screens, and people not focusing on video calls signals that a person is speaking less and not considered as an important, and that can erode trust.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I insist that people just eliminate laptops, videos on. When you do that, you're free to focus your attention on nonverbal cues that your audience may be giving you. These cues reveal far more than what a person is feeling and what a team is hesitant to say to you out loud, or even any written report could ever do. So presence means listening with your eyes as much as your ears. I can't emphasize enough that your behavior sets a standard for the entire organization. A leader's most important responsibility is to model focus and respect for the team's time. If you're distracted, the meeting's value is easily out, affected wasting the time of everyone in that room. So when a leader is truly present, the team feels seen, heard, the atmosphere of candor and brutal honesty is there. And then by mastering presence, the intentional leader not only protects their focus, but also unlocks the highest potential of their team's contribution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Definitely important. I mean, you can think about if you have a meeting with someone and they're multitasking, you certainly don't feel important, or you don't feel like whatever you're discussing matters. And so, that makes, your employees certainly feel that. And I know you also spoke when we were chatting about this episode of, it's important in how you make your employees feel. You mentioned it's also important when you're in meetings with superiors, right? So it's
Absolutely.
just as important to not get distracted if you are trying to multitask in those situations, or you're just, not fully present for whatever reason. You might, miss an opportunity to voice an important opinion or idea, or, yeah.
It's a good point. And I think also when you are in the boardroom, you're going to be invited to meetings where you're going to be in a boardroom setting or an executive leadership team meeting. And you said it correctly, Sarah, this is your time and opportunity for you to let others know what you have. This idea of focus, I didn't just learn it. I mean, I'll share a personal story. It happened to me very early in my career. I had the opportunity to elevate and be in a very high executive leadership team. But yes, we are in customer services and we have those distractions. And eventually, it happened to me early in my career. Eventually, the leader of that meeting didn't see the worth of me having been in that meeting because I was not contributing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when you have the time, when you get the seat at the table, use it effectively, use it to drive change, show what you have so others can see it, that you bring ideas and great inputs into helping an organization improve as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice. All right, let's talk about emotional consistency. So how do you maintain emotional consistency, and what have you found is, the superpower, if you will, in expressing emotion authentically?
I mean, the intentional leader views their emotional state not as a personal reflection of the day, but as a strategic tool. I tell my managers that leaders never get to have a bad day, which is very accurate because the leader's mood sets the tone for the entire team and the organization. The intentional leader understands that emotion consistency is a good avenue for trust. And maintaining that consistency is deliberate. It's a choice that you have to do, and it's a performance that you must maintain. So you must be a good actor in some days. And in some days, you must be an Oscar-winning performance actor because your mood matters to everyone around you. A team cannot focus on strategic execution if they're constantly trying to read your emotions and see where the leader stands.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why consistency makes a leader more predictable in the best way. When the teams know how a leader will respond, this will help them spend less time worrying about things and just more focus on executing on things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to be robotic in your emotions. It doesn't mean you have to, be someone else. The power of expressing authentic emotion is very important. Just be yourself. And it's a crucial rallying cry for the team to see who you are, what you stand for, but also use your authentic emotion to be able to invoke energy and invoke focus on the vision. That authentic emotion and conviction is a great communication to lift the teams towards your vision and to take action.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to work? We all want to work for someone who's energetic, who has inspiration. And if you feel that way, you should also do that to the others in order to drive excitement towards your vision. And as you articulate your vision and your goals, you gotta use that authentic emotion, energy, so that others can see what you're driving for.
Okay. So I'm a little confused then on the balance or the difference between, being authentic and using that emotion to be relatable and, to create sort of a human bond, but also the part about being a good actor. Do you know what I mean? So can you kind of clarify what you mean there? Because I can see how some people would think that the part you said about being able to be a good actor could be being inauthentic.
Correct. And what I mean, being a good actor is more about your imbalanced emotions. We all have bad days at work. We all have bad days, personal days. It's about not bringing those into your work setting. It is about using emotion to best serve your mission at work. Good leaders manages their personal feelings in private so they can deliver inspiring need with collective performance.
Mm-hmm.
So when I mean being good actors is more about there's a lot of things that may happen to you, your boss, with your work, with your family, personal. It's understandable, but that has to be left outside. So in order for you to be able to focus and drive your teams effectively.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So as an intentional leader, it's one thing to create a bold vision, but another to be able to bring that to fruition, to actually execute on it. What is your personal model for disciplined execution, and how do you ensure your teams are making, these strategic moves while also managing risk?
Good question. So I often use the concepts of think big, start small, move fast, which it's used across multiple successful companies to drive innovation. I believe Amazon and also the Mayo Clinic, that's where it originated from. And however, I use my own experience to be able to deploy these concepts. And I do that through how I ask the questions, how I coach, how I support their teams to follow, so they can follow this effortlessly. But I've also added a fourth one, which is accepting risk, and integrating that into the behaviors of my intentional leadership. So I use these concepts not just to innovate, but also to drive discipline in the projects and the strategic things that our leaders must follow.
Mm-hmm.
I'll repeat the concepts for people, but so think big is about setting clear, disruptive vision. Start small. It's about prototyping and testing quickly to validate assumptions. Move fast is about maintaining velocity to outpace your industry and to create a sense of urgency within the organization and the marketplace. And accepting risk, it's about building a culture that tolerates failure as necessary input for breakthrough process to happen.
Mm-hmm.
However, I've had it happen once in my career. Please note that this in no way means that these principles should violate integrity, regulated processes, and compromise on quality. That you also need to set those boundaries, because there's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be that one that's going to take this to a different level that's not tolerable by the organization.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, sometimes we see leaders sort of attain a certain level of success, get comfortable, and succumb to the status quo.
Mhm.
So, what practices helped you to ensure, you continued to drive improvement and innovation, and didn't just settle for, upholding the level of success that was achieved the year prior?
So the status quo is almost the enemy of the intentional leader. I fight it with deliberate purpose, through annual practice and ritual, through a focus on re-engineering performance. This is fundamentally about avoiding complacency, and it starts with a single question every leader needs to ask themselves, and that is, how am I going to significantly improve my personal and team performance from the prior year? You have to take time to step back and honestly assess what has worked and what must be done better. And this reflection forces you to identify things you need to stop, not just doing, and also the things you need to start. I take an annual ritual, and for me, it personally happens right after holidays are done. So between the holiday, New Year, and when people come back to work, that's a reflective period for me. You go through that re-engineering evaluation of what I must and what can I do that is drastically better than the prior year. What can I do differently? And I critique myself. I critique, things that I've done. What can I do better? What can I do faster? In order for me to be able to improve that performance.
Mm-hmm.
But also add that if you need inspiration, the truth lies within the team. In your one-on-ones, get the updates. The one-on-ones cannot just be about updates. You get those updates, but then use those as strategic workshops. I advocate for flipping the script to go beyond the update and focus on two things, and that is, what feedback do you have from me? And also, what are our biggest white space opportunities? And this makes the team accountable for innovation. And it just sets up some great discussions in those one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
So the intentional leader doesn't settle for a moment or for performance. They commit to making every year better than the last.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the ultimate asset of a veteran leader is wisdom. And you talk about this idea of the unfinished portfolio. So can you share a bit more about what is the unfinished portfolio, and how does this concept sort of force an intentional leader to transition their focus, from the accumulation of knowledge and status and capital to, this idea of, if I'm nearing the end of my career, how do I make, a truly impactful contribution?
Oh, great points. So the unfinished portfolio is the list of impactful, meaningful contributions that you are uniquely qualified to make them because of your experience, your talent, and leadership. There's no one else in the organization that may have that experience if you've worked in this industry for many years. So by starting to think that way, start shifting the focus from monetary accumulation, which is important, I understand, but also to what is experimental and what legacy contribution you have to your organization. You're aiming for a last intentional impact. Again, a last intentional impact, so you have no regrets.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this was personally liberating, and but also connected to my growth mindset. I led as I knew well ahead when my date was going to come. So, but then instead of protecting, that's when I took more risk,
Mm-hmm.
more high level projects, more. How do I start coaching more? How do I start leading more than I ever did before? How do I set a better, bigger, bolder strategy? For me, that was a personal liberating
Mm-hmm.
environment, but also super energetic as well. Because as I said earlier, I did not want to have any regrets.
Mm-hmm.
No, no hold, nothing held back. So many leaders whose primary focus is protecting their career um, would not have taken the assignments that I did. But eventually, this catches up to you. People notice, and somehow it starts being reflected in your performance without you even noticing it. But
Mm-hmm.
all the others notice that when your leader is not taking the risk, he or she is not advocating as much anymore, playing it safe. People notice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as I learned from many others, I did not want to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I go back to that when you're driving high impact change, it also uplifts everyone around you and makes them more confident to do even higher things.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only go back and say to in line with intentional leadership, and also another concept for a later topic, growth mindset. That does a better way to shape you as a leader in order for you to leave a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if every leader may be forgotten in the future, but also your own personal legacy that people remember the things that you have done. But also when you're sitting back in retirement, you say, man, I never want to say, I wish I had done this. I
Mm-hmm.
did everything I could have done, whether it's technology, people, process, and tools, in order to drive change in services.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, that point about it's not the time, knowing that date is not the time to sort
Yeah,
of sit back and kick your feet up, right? It's the time to give it all you've got so that when you're finished, you can be really proud of, you know, uh, not only what you accomplished, but the way that you helped others and, the impact that you had. Now, you mentioned earlier, time is our most valuable asset, and I think this is really tough. And I'm curious what specific, disciplines or boundaries, did you use or can you suggest for a leader to be able to protect their capacity and time to be able to do some of this high impact work rather than getting stuck in this constant loop of reacting to urgent demands because they're always there every day. Yeah.
equipment, yeah. So the freedom to pursue this high impact work is it's not found. You have to manufacture that time. The default mode for many leaders, and particularly if you're working in customer services, is to be reactive. You live it in your inbox and status meetings. That's the lifestyle that many of us. I signed up in customer service, but the goal is to aggressively shift your style on how you operate to be more proactive and defend your time and focus. Intentional leaders view their calendar as a budget to create the freedom to do deep, necessary, and strategic thought. Um, and you got to be able to find that time to block that time to do that. Not only the time, but also, luckily I had highly effective administrative assistant who also found that time. Um, better I communicated with her if I was, these are the priorities that I was pursuing. And she knew how to block my time and also help me how to manage that calendar better. So whether it's yourself or you have help doing it, you got to be able to practice that, to be able to protect that time, to be able to create that freedom, to create those thoughts. And people can say, well, I can always work on that from home late at night. Yes, you can. And sometimes I had no choice but to do that given my day. But I implore you, in order to create that balance, try to find that within your environment, within your working hours, to be able, because even within the people around you, because that is going to create better ideas in a more cooperative environment. The one thing I also say is the leaders must also master, this may sound weird, but the master the art of saying no. But this is, and it's not mean about being negative, but this is a direct discipline to shift from status quo to focusing on things that matter. If a request does not significantly advance your organization's vision, your company's vision, your contributions to re-engineering your performance, then it's got to be deferred, delegated, or declined. This is not about avoiding, but it's about strategic triaging to protect your capacity for value creation. You got to be able to focus on re-engineering. You got to be able to focus on creation, and that's got to be part of your calendar. The biggest drain on a leader's time is clinging to operational tasks that no longer perform to your strategic needs. And that's when you got to take the time to take risk on talent, delegate. It might mean that you might have to accept a lower standard that's slightly below your own when you delegate it. But when you do that, it's an opportunity to develop talent. Delegating also proves to your team that they can grow into their roles as well. And yes, it may create more work in the beginning, but use that as a coaching opportunity. No one can do it, but perhaps no one can do it better. Yes, people can do it better than you, but you're not going to find out until you take that chance. So I'll conclude that just set those boundaries to force deep working time. When you do that, the intentional leader gains strategic altitude to steer the organization. You stop being a full-time operator, and some of us were great operators. That's how we got to the roles that we're in. But you got to stop being an operator and become a full-time architect on impact vision, allowing your focus to permeate through the organization. And also, you have time to finish. You have time to complete your unfinished portfolio.
Yeah. So, Eduardo, you've gone through this transition now into retirement, and you spoke about the unfinished portfolio. What advice do you have for how leaders who are maybe approaching that, phase of knowing their date is coming in the next, year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be? What do you suggest that they do to, think about that unfinished portfolio and apply their experience, so that, just like you talked about, they can leave feeling like they left it all on the field, they didn't hold back, and they can feel proud of what they gave?
First, let me say that retirement state is terrific, but the intentional leader does not retire from their experience. They repurpose it. Once you ensure that your finished portfolio is completed, it requires active strategic planning long before the exit date. This process about a preemptive legacy and planning and maintaining relevance. So to ensure the expertise you deploy is still valuable, you must avoid becoming a dinosaur. The intentional leader must consciously stay connected in the business. You just said you saw me at conferences. You saw me at
Mm-hmm.
I'm still attending the conference. I'm still making the connections. Stay connected to the service trends to keep knowledge, to be sharp and be relevant. If expertise is in yesterday's technology or business model, your legacy impact will be minimized. So this means I do this is to stay relevant. I consume a lot of information, reading, research, and actively connecting myself to emerging voices, emerging trends, which we're seeing many, such as AI. But at the end of the day, you gotta stay relevant. You gotta dive in order for you to be able to stay connected to today's trends.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than most leaders spend their time celebrating past successes, I also say that a leader must actively anticipate the future and build contingencies for their operations and for their own next purpose and phase. This helps ensure that your knowledge is prepared to solve tomorrow's problems and not just relegate what happened yesterday. And I would say that don't wait until your final day to launch your legacy. Dedicate a small percentage of your current time, perhaps one day a month, researching, networking, advising a project within your unfinished portfolio. This validates the idea, builds momentum, ensures you aren't starting from something that could stop on your first day of transition. So the final step is to formalize your transition in your identity. But you should always make yourself, or repeat that, you should always make yourself strategically indispensable, but operational unnecessary. Strategically indispensable is around the vision, but operationally necessary around the execution when you're approaching that final step towards retirement.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, I'm just thinking about this idea of knowing that date. And, I love your point about, giving it all you've got, right? Rather than just sort of riding it out. But I can also imagine it's pretty emotional knowing, okay, this date is however far in advance. If you are this intentional leader, you care as much as you do, right? You can't accomplish everything, right? There's no way you're going to be able to make a list of all the things you could impact and get to them. So, how did you prioritize, I guess, what to focus on versus what to force yourself to get comfortable letting go?
Yeah, I think some of the steps that I used earlier, if it's not going to move, I focused on what's going to move strategically my organization, what's going to dramatically improve operational performance. In those strategies and in those vision, I included the customer, I included the competitors, I included innovation, in order for me to prioritize those projects that were going to drive that dramatic improvements in the operations. That's the framework that I used earlier too, with the 4-step process, in order for me to prioritize those projects that we needed to take on forward as an organization. So I consistently asked the team to prioritize, focus, but also throughout this process, just drive your energy, be happy. It is an exciting time. Most people can be emotional, and it's normal that as you start counting your end, and by the way, no one knows this date. You know the date, but as you're starting close to the date, it can be emotional. It can be worrisome personally. As you start, that it could be life-changing in many ways. But at the end, go back to all the principles that I use. You got to be a good actor. You got to drive energy. You got to drive positive emotion. You got to use strategic principles. Re-engineer yourself. Innovate yourself. in order for you to have something that you can be proud of at the end. 5 years from now, people may not remember what you have done. New leaders will come and things will change. But at the end, as I mentioned earlier, it's about I have zero regrets of everything that I could have done in my role. And I put everything I had onto the very end. And I gave it my 100% commitment, energy, and everything I could have possibly done from a performance perspective.
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming and sharing, this part of your journey with everyone, and, the wisdom of what you learned along the way. If our listeners were to remember one crucial point from today's conversation about intentional leadership, what should it be?
Don't let your expertise sit idle. Enjoy what you do and encourage others to do the same. And be the one who proactively brings the best version of your experience to bear the maximum positive impact. Once you accomplish that, and do it on a routine basis, it drives purpose, it drives experience, but also it drives connections. And we all have connections, like I'm connected to you, that are gonna be there after you leave, so that, as I said earlier, you don't become a dinosaur, there's other positive impact that you can make in organizations, in connections, and also helping others. I go back to you, enjoy what you do, encourage others to be the same, help others to be successful as well. And do some of what I'm doing too now as well is, how do I make sure that I give back to this industry that has been so helpful to me and impactful to my own personal career? Now it's time for me to give back.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this with the audience. I really appreciate it.
Sarah, it's been a great pleasure. And also we've seen each other, we've been connected for many years, and it's just extremely very nice and humble to connect with you again in these moments. And these are relationships that you build over the years that I hope they continue to the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what's most important, really, at the end of the day. So thank you so much, everyone. You can find more by visiting the home of the Unscripted podcast at futureoffieldservice.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for the Future of Field Service Insider. That is our once monthly Inner Circle newsletter with content that you will not find anywhere else. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. And as always, thank you for listening.